Elizabeth sits by her husband's hospital bed, feeling her world fall apart. But an unexpected visit from someone from her past reveals the hidden truth. This is a story about the consequences of inaction, when one choice changes everything, and there is no way back. The city is drowning in dark twilight, spreading through the streets with a viscous silence. The sky hangs like a leaden slab. The stars have sunk into the bottomless blackness, and only the occasional streetlights cast pale patches of light onto the wet asphalt. Through the thick glass of the hospital window, sparse lights flicker, reflections of a life that Elizabeth now feels so distant from. She sits on a hard plastic chair, hunched over, pressing her palms to her temples. Her body is exhausted from sleepless nights. Fatigue has seeped into her bones, and her mind is trapped in an endless cycle of anxiety and fear. The room smells of antiseptics, the pale glow of fluorescent lamps, and something else, elusive yet terrifyingly familiar, the scent of despair. "You need some rest," a soft voice breaks the silence. The nurse's eyes hold sympathy, but also a hint of professional detachment. "It won't change the situation, but it will help you get through the night." Elizabeth doesn't respond. She has barely left the room for 3 days, allowing herself only brief moments to rush to the vending machine for coffee that no longer warms her. She is afraid that if she leaves her husband for even a second, he will be gone into the void, leaving her alone in this world. Fear wraps around her heart like a suffocating shroud, squeezing her chest, making it hard to breathe. On the hospital bed lies Michael, her love, her meaning. His skin is pale, almost translucent, as if life is already slipping away from him, as if he is becoming a shadow while still alive. His face is peaceful, but not with the serenity of sleep. Rather, with that eerie stillness that makes her tremble with horror. The monitor above his head beeps in steady intervals while the breathing machine works for him, forcing air into his lungs with terrifying mechanical precision. "He's strong," Elizabeth whispers, clutching his cold hand, so foreign, so motionless. "You are strong, aren't you?" No response, not even the faintest movement of his fingers. Only the steady beeping of the machines, counting down the moments like grains of sand in an hourglass that is about to run out. "This isn't fair." Her voice breaks, and she buries her face in her hands, trying to hide from the reality that is relentlessly crumbling around her. "Why him? Why not someone else? Why my love, my life, my soul?" The nurse sighs, gently touches her shoulder, and quietly leaves, letting Elizabeth remain alone with her pain. Outside, the city pulses with life. People laugh, argue, love. But here in this room, her world is dying. The silence is too loud, too ringing, filled with the echoes of fear and hopelessness. The door to the room creaks slightly. Elizabeth lifts her head, as if through a thick fog. In the doorway stands someone she never expected to see. "Elizabeth." The voice is low, hollow, as if stuck in a past she'd rather forget. There's something heavy in its tone, something that makes her want to run. "We need to talk." And her heart clenches. She doesn't want to hear that voice. She doesn't want to see this person, because everything that happened began with him. Elizabeth freezes, staring at the figure in the doorway. The darkness of the corridor blurs the man's features, but the voice she hasn't heard in so many years, instantly awakens memories, sharp as shards of broken glass. Her heart clenches, and a painful lump rises in her throat. Her entire body tenses, as if instinctively bracing for a blow. "Leave." Her voice trembles, but she tries to sound firm. "I have nothing to say to you." The man steps inside, and now the hospital lights reveal his face. Deep wrinkles have carved into his skin, shadows of exhaustion lie beneath his eyes, and regret lingers at the corners of his lips. Logan, the man who once meant everything to her, but now is merely a ghost from the past, returning at the worst moment of her life. "Please just listen." His voice is quiet, yet persistent, as if he knew he would be pushed away but came anyway. "I don't expect forgiveness, but you need to know the truth." Elizabeth clenches her fists, nails digging painfully into her palms. The truth? Now, when her life is falling apart, when her one true love is on the brink of death. How dare he walk back into her life at this moment? You're too late, Logan. Her voice turns hard, almost icy, but pain lingers beneath it, dull and exhausting. Anything you had to say lost its meaning years ago. Logan lowers his head, like a man accustomed to defeat. His shoulders tremble slightly, but he doesn't turn away, doesn't retreat. He takes another step forward, but Elizabeth quickly raises her hand, as if setting an invisible barrier between them. Her eyes burn with anger, hidden beneath a shell of despair. If you don't leave, I'll call security. Her voice cracks, but she still holds his gaze. He falls silent but doesn't move. Logan's gaze grows heavier, filled with something deep and indescribably complex. Taking a deep breath, he gathers his thoughts, then slowly, carefully enunciating each word, he says, "Everything that happened didn't start the way you think. And what happened to Michael? I had something to do with it." Elizabeth feels the ground slip from beneath her feet. Her chest feels empty, as if the air has been ripped from her lungs. She doesn't understand what he means, but an icy wave of fear crashes over her, paralyzing her, trapping her in place. Her pulse pounds in her temples. "What?" Her voice is hoarse, barely audible, but Logan hears. He steps closer, looking straight into her eyes, his gaze filled with sorrow and something unbearably painful. "I need to tell you how it all really happened." Elizabeth feels her fingers clenching into tight fists. "Logan." His words echo in her head like a hollow drumbeat, but their meaning doesn't fully sink in. Her breath hitches, her chest tightens, as if someone has wrapped icy fingers around her heart. Her world is already crumbling, and now this? Her gaze darts across his face, searching for any trace of doubt, but all she finds is an unbearable weight. "What did you just say?" Her voice trembles, but there's steel in it, slicing through the silence like a knife. Logan hesitates. She can see him struggling, grasping for words. He swallows, runs a hand over his face as if trying to erase the tension, but the pain in his eyes remains, deep and searing. "I need you to listen," he says at last, his voice almost pleading. "It's important." Elizabeth shakes her head. Her eyes flash with anger, but deep inside them lurks fear. Her heart pounds, the beat resounding in her temples. Her throat tightens, her breath comes in short, ragged bursts. What could he possibly say that would change anything? She wants to scream, to shatter this moment, to run, but her legs feel rooted to the floor. "I don't want to listen." Her voice cuts through the air. "You have no right to come here and tell me you had something to do with what happened to Michael. This isn't your business, Logan." "It never was." He closes his eyes as if bracing for her rage, but steps forward nonetheless. There's no threat in his movement, but that only makes Elizabeth more afraid. A cold sweat prickles down her spine. Her fingers tremble, betraying the tension roiling inside her. Instinctively, she takes a step back, as if trying to shield herself not only from him, but from the memories clawing their way through the barriers she's built in her mind. She wants to turn away, to leave, but she's paralyzed by a fear she doesn't fully understand. What is he going to say? What will change after these words? Her mind screams for her to protect herself, but her heart is weighed down by an unbearable dread. If it were that simple. His voice is quiet, burdened with the weight of too many years. "I would have left. I really would have. But you need to know. I am guilty." Elizabeth freezes. The air around them seems to thicken, the tension almost tangible, like a taut string about to snap. Every breath is a struggle, as if an unseen force is pressing against her chest, refusing to let the air in. She studies his face, tracing every wrinkle, every shadow in his eyes, and her heartbeat accelerates. She has seen pain before, but this is different. It hasn't just burned him. It has left scars deep and unhealed, like wounds that never closed. Logan looks like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear any longer. A deep, all-consuming anxiety rises within her. She wants to turn away, to shut her eyes, but something keeps her locked in place, staring at him. And for the first time, a terrifying thought creeps into her mind. What if he's telling the truth? "Explain," she finally forces out, her voice no longer as firm. It wavers as if on the verge of breaking. "And you'd better be honest." Logan takes a deep breath, as if gathering his strength, then averts his gaze, seemingly searching for the right words in the emptiness of the hospital room. The dim light from the lamps casts sharp shadows on his face, emphasizing the exhaustion and burden he carries within. A flicker of doubt, pain, and bitterness flashes in his eyes, but he still takes a step forward, closing the distance between them, as if realizing there is no way back. "It all started a few months ago," he says hoarsely, as if each word physically pains him. "Back then, I didn't understand where it would lead." Elizabeth doesn't move. Her heart pounds so hard she feels like its beats echo through the room. Something indescribable rises in her chest, a mixture of fear, anger, and helplessness. She notices his fingers clenching nervously into fists, the barely perceptible tremor crossing his forehead. Her gaze scans his face, clinging to every detail, searching for the truth hidden within it. "Just say it, Logan." Her voice is taut like a string on the verge of snapping. "If you came here, it means you know something I don't. Don't torment me." Logan nods slowly, inhaling deeply as if trying to fill his lungs with air before saying something irreversible. He hesitates but then finally speaks. "I never wanted it to go this far. But I made a mistake. A huge mistake. And now Michael is paying the price for it." Elizabeth steps back as if his words burn her from the inside, like a cold blade plunging directly into her heart. Her mind refuses to accept what she's hearing, but an icy fear is already spreading through her, enveloping her completely. Her knees weaken but she forces herself to stand, not to break. "What are you talking about?" Her voice is barely audible, trembling with fragility and desperation. "What did you do, Logan?" He runs a hand through his hair, as if trying to erase the past from his memory, as if a single motion could rid him of the pain he carries inside. But it's impossible. His shoulders slump, he looks defeated, hollow. His breathing is uneven, but he finds the strength to lift his eyes and meet her gaze. "I'm not just connected to this." His voice is hushed, almost a whisper, but heavy with the weight of confession. "I was the reason it happened to him." Elizabeth freezes. Cold spreads through her veins, paralyzing every cell in her body. Everything around her loses meaning. "Logan, the reason Michael is lying in this hospital bed between life and death." A ringing noise fills her head, distorting reality as if the world has suddenly become foreign and unreal. She wants to say something, but the words are lodged in her throat. Her lips tremble, horror floods her eyes, and something uncontrollable swells within her. Pain, fury, despair. "No." She exhales barely above a whisper. "No, this can't be true." The room grows so silent that Elizabeth can hear her own breathing, ragged, frantic, as if she has just run a marathon. Blood pounds in her temples, her mind refusing to accept reality. But Logan's words echo again and again, shattering her from within. Her lips tremble, her palms are slick with sweat, but she is unable to either clench or release them. A lump forms in her throat so thick it feels like she is suffocating. "You're lying," she whispers, but her voice cracks, turning into little more than a breath. "Tell me you're lying." Logan lowers his head, his shoulders trembling slightly, but he doesn't try to defend himself. His eyes are filled with emptiness, darkness soaked in remorse, as if even he can't bear the weight of his own words. He doesn't answer immediately, but his silence speaks louder than anything else. It presses down on her, suffocates her, forcing her to believe what she doesn't want to believe. "If I could take it all back," he finally says, his voice hoarse, as if the words are clawing their way out of him. There is more than regret in his tone. It is resignation, the understanding that forgiveness will never come. "I would give anything for this not to have happened, but it did, and I am to blame." Elizabeth clenches her teeth, her hands curling into fists so tightly that her nails dig into her palms, leaving deep crescent marks. She doesn't know what to feel, rage or pain. Everything inside her screams, tearing apart at the seams, but not a single sound escapes her lips. Her body trembles like a string pulled too tight, ready to snap at any moment. "How?" Her voice shakes, barely holding back the breaking point. How could you let this happen?" Logan closes his eyes for a second, takes a deep breath, then looks at her. His gaze is heavy, exhausted, filled with memories he has tried so hard to escape. His lips quiver, fingers nervously gripping the edge of his jacket as if he, too, is searching for something to hold on to, something to keep him from collapsing under the weight of the truth. "I'll tell you everything," he finally says, and there is something inevitable in his voice. "But after this, you may hate me even more." Elizabeth feels the world around her crumbling. The air has grown too thick, the walls are closing in, and pain is filling every inch of her being. She wants to run, but her legs are rooted to the floor. She wants to scream, but her voice betrays her. The only thing she can do is wait. Wait for the words that will either completely break her, or give her the answer she has feared all along. Elizabeth doesn't take her eyes off Logan, her heart pounding so loudly it drowns out all other sounds. The room is filled with a ringing silence, thick with tension so palpable it almost crackles. The air feels heavy, dense, charged with an unspoken force. A shiver runs down her spine, but she remains motionless, barely breathing, afraid of what he's about to say. "Speak," she forces through clenched teeth. "I'm waiting." Logan exhales deeply, closing his eyes as if gathering his thoughts, but his expression betrays fear. Fear of his own words, fear of her reaction, fear of what is inevitable. He stands like a man walking willingly to the gallows, knowing the rope is tightening around his neck. "It all started the day I made a choice. A stupid, desperate choice I regret every single second of my life." His voice shakes, but he forces himself to speak clearly. His hands clench into fists, knuckles turning white from the tension. Pain flickers in his eyes, deep, ancient, as if he has carried this weight for far too long. Elizabeth notices it, but her own heart is gripped by a steel band of fear, growing into something even stronger, anger. "Michael was in the wrong place at the wrong time," he continues, his voice quieter now, but the words land heavier because of it. "And I could have changed everything. But I didn't." Elizabeth inhales sharply, as if she's just been punched in the chest. Her fingers curl into tight fists, nails digging into her skin, but she doesn't feel the pain. 100 thoughts race through her mind, all screaming the same thing. No, this isn't true. She wants to reject it, to cast it off, but the words have already sunk deep, cutting into her soul like glass shards. "What do you mean?" she whispers, her voice barely audible, but laced with a quiet threat. Logan meets her eyes, and in that moment she knows. The truth will be devastating. It will not bring relief. It will not allow her to turn the page. It will shatter what little remains intact, and there will be no going back. Somewhere outside, a car horn blares, but the sound feels distant, foreign, as if it belongs to another world. A world that has nothing to do with this moment. Beyond these hospital walls, life goes on. People rushing about their business, laughing, arguing, while here in this room time has stopped. The space between them has shrunk to a single point, a battlefield where fate will deliver its final blow. Elizabeth feels her body tense to the breaking point, like a drawn bowstring ready to snap. Her fingers tremble, but she tightens them into fists, holding herself on the edge of control. Her gaze is locked onto Logan, as if trying to tear away his mask, to see the truth before he even speaks it. But he stands before her, still tall, still strong, yet broken, dimmed. His shoulders sag slightly, his breathing is uneven, and in his eyes, there is not just guilt but pain, raw and unhidden. In this room only the two of them remain, she and the man who now holds her entire world in his hands, poised to crush it with one irreversible confession that cannot be undone, erased, or forgotten. Logan takes a deep breath, his shoulders trembling slightly. He doesn't rush to speak, as if each word is a stone weighing down his soul. His gaze is fixed on the floor, his hands shaking, but he clenches them into fists, trying to suppress the storm inside. Elizabeth waits. Her eyes gleam in the dim light of the room, devoid of pity, only tense anticipation mixed with creeping horror. Her breath becomes sharp and shallow, her chest rising and falling as if her heart is trying to break free. "It wasn't an accident," he finally forces out, his words seeming to tear through the air. "What happened to Michael? I could have stopped it, but I didn't." She jerks forward, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as if searching for something solid in a collapsing world. Blood pounds in her temples, her fingers numb from the tension. "What do you mean?" Her voice cracks, but she quickly regains control. "Speak." Logan closes his eyes, as if hoping to find an escape in the darkness. But there is none. Escape is impossible now. His chest rises with a shaky breath, an almost imperceptible tremor running across his face. "That night when it happened, I was there. I saw everything. I knew he was in danger, but—" He pauses, clenching his fists so tightly his knuckles turn white. His face twists with pain, his lips quiver, and for a moment, he loses his voice. He knew something he shouldn't have known. It involved people better left alone. I warned him, told him to stay out of it, but he wouldn't listen. He was too honest, too stubborn. He believed the truth was more important than anything. Elizabeth listens, unblinking, her heart seemingly frozen. They came for him. I stood in the shadows, watched as they took him. He resisted, but there were too many of them. They beat him, mocked him. I could have done something. I could have called someone, could have stopped them. But I just stood there and watched. Logan swallows hard, his eyes shutting as if the images of that night flash before him once more. I heard him call my name. He knew I was there. He looked right at me. He hoped I would help. But I couldn't move. I stood there, frozen like a coward. They only left him when he couldn't move anymore. And I just waited for it to be over. Elizabeth takes a slow step back, as if colliding with an invisible barrier. A cold wave of fear and disgust washes over her. Her lips tremble, her eyes widen in horror. A scream lodges in her throat, refusing to escape. You saw him suffer? And you did nothing." Her voice breaks, barely audible, overflowing with unbearable pain. Logan lowers his head. His eyes are empty, dark, filled with the shadow of something irreversible. "Yes," he admits quietly. Elizabeth feels the walls of the room closing in on her, crushing her. Everything she knew is crumbling. Her heart pounds erratically, blood roaring in her ears. Her legs threaten to give way, but she forces herself to stand, clinging to the last shreds of control. "Oh my God," she whispers, tears welling in her eyes, blurring the world around her. Something inside her cracks, shatters, tears apart. "How could you?" She takes another step back, but the air in the room is too thick, too heavy. She feels like she's suffocating. Her hands shake, her breath falters, and inside her, a monstrous, unbearable realization grows. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. And the man standing before her is now a stranger. Elizabeth doesn't feel the ground beneath her feet. Everything around her seems unstable, blurred, as if she is sinking into thick, viscous fog. Her chest tightens, her breath falters, as if someone has wrapped a hand around her throat, refusing to let her breathe. A dull ringing fills her ears, and her heart pounds so violently it feels as if it will burst through her rib cage. Even the sound of her own voice feels distant, foreign, as though she is speaking from underwater. "You." Her voice trembles, turning into a barely audible whisper. "You let him die? You just stood there and watched." Logan doesn't respond. His silence is deafening, heavier than any words. It presses down on her, digs into her skin, settles like a crushing weight on her shoulders. He lowers his head, his hands shaking, fingers clenching convulsively, but he doesn't attempt to justify himself. His gaze lingers on the floor as if the truth lies hidden there, too unbearable to speak aloud. "Say something, Logan." Her voice cracks, rising into a desperate scream. She steps forward, almost closing the space between them, her eyes glistening with tears, pain, hatred. It feels as if she might strike him, just to release even a fraction of the storm raging inside her. Logan exhales sharply, finally lifting his gaze, and in his eyes, she sees something broken, shattered. It isn't just guilt. It's something deeper, more hopeless, as though he carries a weight that will never be lifted. "I couldn't," he rasps, his voice nearly breaking. "I couldn't move. I was afraid." Elizabeth stares at him in stunned disbelief, as if seeing a stranger before her. Her fists tremble, nails digging into her palms, leaving deep red crescents. An overwhelming rage rises inside her, so fierce it feels like she might explode. Pain and fury intertwine, crashing over her in relentless waves, refusing her even a moment's respite. Afraid. Her voice drips with scorn, heavy and burning. Do you think your fear makes this any easier for me? Do you think it matters to me that you were scared while Michael was suffering? Logan squeezes his eyes shut, his shoulders sagging. He doesn't try to defend himself, doesn't offer any excuses. He simply stands there, as if resigned to his fate. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Elizabeth. I just wanted you to know the truth. She shakes her head, tears streaming down her face, hot and uncontrollable. Her world has crumbled. Everything she once believed in has shattered into dust, scattered beyond repair. She stands among the ruins, but she has no idea how to piece them back together. Perhaps she never will. Elizabeth stands paralyzed by pain, as if her body refuses to obey. Everything inside her screams for action, but she remains motionless. The world crumbles around her, disintegrating like a rotted foundation upon which her life once stood. A ringing fills her ears, her breath falters, and her heart pounds so furiously that it feels as if it will tear through her chest at any moment. She clenches her fists, nails digging deep into her skin, leaving red crescent marks, but she feels no pain. The betrayal, the anger, the bitterness suffocate her far more than any physical wound. The fire inside her burns brighter, consuming her, turning agony into something else. Something sharper, colder, deadlier. How could you? Her voice is laced with pain and hatred, slicing through the air like a blade. How could you just stand there and watch? Logan remains silent. He stares at her with empty, exhausted eyes, but his silence only fuels her rage. How dare he look at her like that? How dare he appear broken when he is the reason for her suffering? His lips quiver but no words escape. He absorbs her fury, taking it in without defense, without justification. Elizabeth lunges forward, grabbing the collar of his shirt, yanking hard enough to wrinkle the fabric in her grip. She feels his warmth, the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her fingers, but it doesn't calm her. It ignites her fury further. You should have saved him. You should have done something. Her voice wavers and the tears she has fought so long to suppress spill over, hot and relentless, burning as they slide down her cheeks. Logan closes his eyes, pain twisting his features. His breathing is ragged, as if his own words are suffocating him. I know, he whispers. I know. Elizabeth releases him abruptly, stumbling back as if his touch scalds her. She gasps for breath, her shoulders rising and falling as she trembles under the weight of emotions she can no longer contain. Her knees threaten to buckle, her body shaking from the sheer force of her fury and grief. You broke me, Logan. Her voice is barely above a whisper, hoarse and heavy with despair. You took everything from me, everything that made my life whole, that gave it meaning. You stole my future, my hope, my faith in people. Logan meets her gaze, and within his eyes, she sees something inevitable. Pain, remorse, and a depth of sorrow that words cannot capture. It is not just guilt, it is utter devastation, the realization of his own powerlessness, his failure. His eyes are hollow, but behind that emptiness rages a storm, consuming what little remains of the man he once was. If I could turn back time. His voice is a whisper before the storm, filled with raw helplessness. I would do everything differently. I wouldn't turn away. I wouldn't stand there paralyzed by fear. I would step forward, tear him from the hands of those who had no mercy. I would do something, anything, other than that shameful inaction. But it is too late. Time cannot be rewound, and his mistakes are etched into the past like stains that will never wash away. It is too late for regrets, too late for apologies, because no words, no matter how sincere, will bring back the dead. It is too late to change anything because the chance to fix it has long since slipped through his fingers. The world has already shattered, fractured into irreparable pieces, like broken glass scattered beyond repair. And even if someone tried to put those shards back together, the cracks would always remain, a testament to the pain that can never be forgotten. Elizabeth stands amidst the ruins of what was once her life, realizing there is no way back. Elizabeth stands frozen in this shattered reality, where there is no longer a foundation, no meaning. Her breathing is heavy, each inhale a battle, as if the very air scorches her lungs. A hollow emptiness yawns inside her, cold and vast, but somewhere deep within, a fire still smolders, unrelenting, searing. The pain, gnawing at her insides like a rusted blade, keeps her standing, keeps her from collapsing. She turns to look at Logan, who stands before her like a ghost, a reminder of broken dreams. His shoulders are slumped, his gaze unfocused, as if he knows that nothing can be undone. He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't try to atone. He simply waits for her final decision. What now? His voice is hollow, laced with bitterness, carrying the weight of resignation, as if he already knows the answer but clings to the faint hope of hearing something different. Elizabeth clenches her fists, nails digging into her palms, leaving raw, almost bloody imprints. The pain grounds her, keeps her from unraveling completely. A tremor runs through her body, but she forces herself to stand tall, to show no weakness, to deny him the satisfaction of seeing just how deeply he has broken her. Now, she lets out a bitter laugh, but there is no amusement in her eyes, only a void of immeasurable pain. Now I have to learn how to live in a world where you no longer exist. Logan flinches as if struck, but he says nothing. He knew this moment would come, but hearing it from her lips is something else entirely. Her words cut through him, tearing him apart, leaving nothing but emptiness in their wake. But he has no right to ask her to stay, no right to hope. Silence stretches between them, thick and suffocating. It lasts only a moment, yet for them it is an eternity. Elizabeth looks at him one last time, memorizing every detail, every line of pain on his face, every flicker of regret in his eyes, every trace of sorrow that can no longer change anything. She takes a deep breath, then turns away and walks forward, leaving behind the man she once loved and the past that can no longer be her present. Her footsteps echo in the silence, and with each step, she feels something inside her finally shatter. But she doesn't stop. She doesn't look back. She moves forward because there is no way back. Elizabeth steps outside, and the night air strikes her face with an icy gust, forcing her to hold her breath for a moment. It wraps around her, seeps through her clothes, chills her to the bone, but she does not shiver. She does not feel the cold, only emptiness. Everything inside her is burned to ashes, like the ruins left after a devastating fire. Her footsteps echo in the void, a lonely sound reverberating through the emptiness. She walks slowly, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile balance inside her. The pain constricting her chest feels endless, but no tears fall. She forbids herself to cry. Tears are weakness, and there is no place for weakness in her world anymore. The city moves on. Cars pass by, muffled conversations drift from pedestrians, music plays somewhere in the distance. Headlights flash before her, reflecting in the wet pavement, but it all feels distant, foreign. As if she is walking through a painting created by someone else, a world where she no longer belongs. She feels like a ghost among the living, a shadow drifting along with the current. She pauses for a moment, staring into the city lights. A sharp, ragged breath fills her lungs, as if she is trying to fill the void within herself with anything at all. Her thoughts scatter, flickering back to what once was. To Logan. To his eyes filled with regret. To his voice laden with sorrow. To his words, which no longer mean anything but still echo in her mind like the remnants of a long-past storm. What if? The treacherous thought slips through. A whisper from the past clinging to her with desperate fingers. What if things could still be changed? What if she should not have walked away? But she shuts it down immediately, clenching her jaw, tightening her fists. No, there is no way back. Not ever. Taking a deep breath, Elizabeth straightens, lifts her chin, and takes another step forward. One step at a time without looking back. Every movement is a battle with herself, with the pain, with the past. Every step is a struggle, but she keeps going. She does not know where this road leads, but she knows one thing for certain. She must keep walking. Because if she stops, the past will catch up to her. And that is something she can never survive again. Elizabeth walks down the street, not knowing where she is headed. Her feet move forward automatically, as if her weary soul is searching for an escape. The icy wind lashes against her face, scattering her thoughts, tangling her breath, but she keeps walking, pushing through the night as if confronting her own fears. People pass by, blurred shadows under the glow of streetlights. They laugh, they talk, they live. Their world hasn't shattered into pieces, hasn't collapsed under the weight of loss. They don't know what it's like to lose everything. Elizabeth feels like an outsider among them, as if her heart is trapped in another time, another space, one where the pain is still raw and memories tear at her soul. She stops at the corner of the street. Before her stands a cafe, warm and inviting, its soft light spilling through the glass. Inside, people chat, laugh, savoring moments that now feel so distant to her. She hesitates. Inside her, there is an emptiness colder than the winter night, and she realizes that she is afraid of being alone. Afraid to be still in her pain and hear it too clearly. The fear of solitude tightens around her throat, but stronger than that is the desire to escape, even for a moment, from the agony tearing her apart. With a heavy sigh, she pushes open the door and steps inside. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and pastries envelopes her, filling the air with something warm, almost forgotten. Something inside her tightens, a sharp, painful twist, as if this simple, cozy world is not meant for her, as if it will reject her the moment she tries to belong to it. She chooses a table by the window, sits down, and wraps her hands around a warm cup. But the heat does not reach inside. Her fingers tremble, not from the cold but from the hollowness still gripping her. Her eyes drift past the glass, watching the world continue outside, untouched by her tragedy. She catches her own reflection in the window, tired, hollow. Who is she now? Without love, without faith, without a past? A person lost to herself, yet forced to keep existing? Her grip tightens around the cup, as if trying to hold on to something tangible, something that won't disappear, won't shatter. And then someone sits across from her. A male silhouette, the light scent of expensive cologne, a warm gaze, an unassuming smile. There's no insistence, no pressure, just simple human presence. "Are you okay?" he asks softly. Elizabeth lifts her eyes. In her mind, a storm of everything that was pain, betrayal, loss, fear. But for the first time in a long while, she feels something else. Possibility, the chance to move forward. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but somewhere ahead, there is a path to walk. And maybe, just maybe, this conversation is the first step. Even after the heaviest losses and deepest betrayals, life goes on, and everyone has the strength to move forward. Subscribe to the channel, and hit the like button, so you don't miss more heartwarming stories.